Welcome to another edition of Bowie TV's Youth, Community, and Lifestyle. During this hour, we're bringing you highlights from some of our shows focused on youth, community, and lifestyle. Please be sure to give us a follow on all of our social platforms. First up on How to Steam Your Dreams, check out the preview of the past 2025 DMV Ocean Bowl Games. On Read Science, author Dan Egan talks climate issues and how our world is shifting out of balance on this part 2. Next on the Spotlight DMV, entrepreneur Pinky Cole sits down with Angie Ange for a conversation focused on growth, risk, loss, and clarity. Finally, on the Hair Kytchen, we take a look at Luminocity and the beautiful home light shows of the holiday season on this part 2. Thank you for tuning into this week's programming of Bowie TV's Youth, Community, and Lifestyle, and have a safe and happy New Year.
Yeah, and it led to a very dramatic recovery of Lake Erie and waters across the country. They basically, well, I mean, the industry worked with them once the writing was on the wall, but if it wasn't banned in certain municipalities, the companies making detergent greatly reduced the amount in their boxes of detergent, and the result was just miraculous. In 1972, it being Lake Erie was still considered Dead Sea. And the reason it's a Dead Sea is because it's not dead. It's because so much algae was growing in the lake that it squeezed out life for everything else. Particularly when it died and decomposed and burned up all the oxygen in the water. It really left not a lot of room for other forms of life. So 72, it's America's Dead Sea. By 85, I think this was in the Great Lakes book, not this phosphorus book, but Dr. Seuss received a letter from some researchers at Ohio State that said that this line in the Lorax isn't fair anymore. We're
We've straightened up. We've cleaned up.
We got more fishing lines than punch lines finally, and you should note that. And the good doctor, he's since deceased, he wrote back and said, "You're right," and he pulled it from the Lorax. So if you go down to the bookstore today and pick up a copy, you'll see no reference to Lake Erie being a mess, but. It probably should be back because we're back in the same fix.
Yeah.
What I found interesting with your book is and journalists do this very well, is they put a personal story. So the guy who picked up phosphorus along the shore and, burns him pretty well. And then, the story of the kid who falls into the river or lake with the foaming soap, and the story in the newspaper is not, look at all this foaming bubbles. Oh, where's the kid?
People were doing their dishes. So at the time, this detergent concoction not only turned waters green, but it turned their surface bubbly, and that was just considered normal by the 1960s, and So anyway, but we are back at Lake Erie again, and freshwater lakes around the country and the world, because phosphorus is again a problem, and this time it's not detergent.
Yeah.
Right.
It's basically agriculture runoff.
Now,
So,
to get that connection, can we draw the line? Can we talk about fertilizer for a little bit, the agricultural revolution, and the annoying enigma that is Fritz Haber?
Annoying, maybe ghastly.
Yes.
Yeah, so the book really starts with the discovery of phosphorus as an element, which happened in the 1600s, and I kind of trace its use through the centuries to the point where it became a very potent weapon. In Vietnam, they referred to it as Willie Pete, white phosphorus.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incendiary. It burns everything that it touches, but it also has this miraculous fertilizing property. And as far as the nomenclature, it got confusing, so I decided to just go with, I'm going to call it all phosphorus. Mm-hmm. Even though when we're talking about detergent and we're talking about fertilizer, we are talking about phosphates, which is oxygen atoms surrounding a phosphorus atom. Mm-hmm. But we began to realize, at first I don't even think that it was, people I know that they didn't know what it was about certain materials that made crops grow. They just knew it did. And ever since we started agriculture 10,000 years ago, it's been a struggle to keep fields fertile, because they'll naturally be depleted as crops are harvested and those crops are carted away, and along with it goes the phosphorus. So like a forest is self-sustaining because trees grow, die, decay, and it's the circle of life, made manifest by these phosphorus atoms. So early on, we were using things like manure, blood, hair, cloth, and then bones. Anything people could think of to throw on a field, and it was all trial and error. And for some reason, bones worked very, very well. And England was a pioneer in this, because this was going on in the 1700s, early 1800s, and the Little Ice Age was still, messing with crops, and famine was ever a threat. And so staying fed was like our job. Still is today. We're just a little removed from it. So bones became a hot item, and they were the original source for animals, and particularly bone shavings from like knife factories, where they would make the handles out of bones, and the shavings would be sprinkled, and it was like this miracle dust. But there's only so many knives and bone handles. So eventually they being the British, got more ambitious. And there's a section in the book, I was fortunate to be able to go over to Waterloo before the was. But yeah, so in 1815, like 40,000 soldiers fell in 10 hours on the battlefield of Waterloo in Belgium, along with a bunch of horses. And it was, I forgot the number, but they were dropping like more than once a second, I think. It was ghastly. And today, if you go there, there's a visitor center, and there's, this interpretive exhibits, but it isn't sacred ground. It's farmed. And I think a big reason is because there hasn't been any remains on that battlefield, which isn't a lot bigger than a few golf courses strung together. It's remarkably small. Just the carnage is just unfathomable. But there aren't any bones. There's no mass burial grave, because not long after the war, the British came back to, reap their rewards of the battle, I suppose. And indiscriminately, they didn't just take Napoleon's soldiers. They took their own, brought them back, and ground them up in these specially built mills to make bone dust to spread on their turnips and their wheat. And so that was kind of the dawn of commercial fertilizer. But again, and that's what the first part of this book is just like the lengths we were going to find new sources of phosphorus. So after we ran out of bones, we needed something else. And that led us being whites and Western Europeans to the west coast of South America.
Yes, and
to the Guano Islands.
Yep.
Which are just mounds of bird poop. Before I started working on this, I thought that guano was just bat crap, but it's bird crap too.
That's all of it.
And these islands are lousy with it, because there's a lot of fish swimming in that area. They're following the Humboldt Current up the west coast of South Africa or South America. and those fish draw in birds, and those birds need to nest and need to poop. And they were doing so on these islands for millennia, for eons, I mean, for forever. And it doesn't really rain there. So what would normally be washed off these islands, off the landscape, and flushed into the sea, where it would provide nutrition for the aquatic world, it just kind of stored up there like a battery of nutrition, of fertilizer. And so, you know, I was saying it was like the 1820s, the British were big on bones. By the 1840s, they were moving toward this guano, and so was the rest of Europe and North America. And at the time, you know, I encountered some reporting, and they were characterizing these mountains of bird poop as inexhaustible. You know, and if it is exhaustible, it's going to be hundreds of years. And that's the story of phosphorus. It wasn't. It was played out in a matter of 40 years or so.
Yeah.
So that set us on the hunt again. And so today, where we get our fertilizer, our phosphorus, so fertilizer is basically three critical elements: potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus. And we'll talk about nitrogen in a second. And there is no imminent risk of running out of potassium, but phosphorus, it was different. And so geologists got involved, chemists got involved, and they eventually learned that certain rock formations, primarily sedimentary rock formations, which are really the accretion of so much dead life over millions of years, are a remarkable source of phosphorus. And so that's what's keeping us alive today, that and nitrogen and potassium. And so nitrogen was a big problem in the 1800s as well. And so the hunt was always on for that until Fritz Haber came up with the Haber-Bosch process, which was basically a way to pull nitrogen out of the air. And the air, I can't remember, it's like 80% nitrogen. I mean, there's plenty of it. It's just not typically in a usable form for most plant life. Certain plants, legumes, can snatch it from the air, but most couldn't. And Fritz figured out how to do this, and that lifted the cap on the nitrogen side of things. So I talk a little bit in the book about the law of the minimum. And once we solved the nitrogen problem, and the potassium was never really a problem, it became exclusively a phosphorus problem. And so we've been, you know, desperate for it ever since, and it's been remarkably successful. We have, you know, probably 8 times more people on Earth than we did when we first started using the stuff. But it's not, as we should have learned from the bird poop and the bones, not inexhaustible. And so these deposits of sedimentary rock are not common. And the biggest ones that we have in the U.S. are in Florida, but those are expected to play out in a matter of decades, 3 or 4 maybe.
Wow. Yeah.
At which point there's some other reserves in the Carolinas and in Idaho, but they're not as extensive. It seems inevitable that we're going to be dependent on other countries for our nutritional security, which is a lot more complicated, I would argue, than energy security, because there's workarounds for oil, but every living cell on the planet, maybe in the universe, needs phosphorus. It's in every cell. And as Isaac Asimov said back in the 50s, you know, it's life's bottleneck. There's no substitute for it. So most of the reserves today, 70 to 80% of the reserves are defined as areas that are known to have phosphorus-rich rock that are able to be mined in an economic way.
But as long as we're effectively mining phosphorus, it's a limited resource.
Yes. By definition of the mining of it. But so 70-80% of it is in Western Sahara and Morocco, which is kind of a dicey place at the moment. And so there could come a time when, you know, these countries, these far-flung countries, are basically, you know, they're the dispensers of fertilizer for the rest of the world, and that's kind of a dicey prospect. When that'll happen is very controversial, and, you know, maybe 10 years ago, an Australian researcher came out with a study saying it could be in less than a century. And people who know more about mining and the industry say, no, we've got 350.
Yeah, they're poo-pooing that estimate.
But even so, 350, 400 years is not, it's not a long time.
Not a long time.
And
Yeah.
and here's the paradox. While we're blowing through it at an unsustainable pace, we're also soiling or spoiling our waters.
Just excess, too much. Yeah.
Algae, toxic algae. And so that's the cost of this centuries-long hunt that we've been on for, quick and easy food.
Because the phosphorus is essential for things to grow, and that includes things in the water where the phosphorus runs off and the algae live.
Yes.
And so that's how we get to the algae problem and the cyanobacteria and cyanotoxins, which seems to have evolved for some reason.
Yeah. That's, I was talking about the limiting factor earlier, and phosphorus is, by most accounts, in almost every case, the limiting factor in aquatic worlds. So a lake like Lake Erie, or a pond not far from my house in Milwaukee, they're primed to explode with algae if they get too much fertilizer, and they're getting too much fertilizer. And that's the consequence of decades of putting more of this chemical concoction, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, on the landscape, more than the landscape needed, and so it washed off. But it's also manure. It's a big problem due to manure, because I'll back up real quickly. We were, talking about the Cuyahoga River and all the trouble back in the early 70s. That not only got us a new version of the Lorax, it got us the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act really throttled the industry's ability to just wantonly pollute. And so in regulatory parlance, they talk about point sources, which are basically factories with pipes and smokestacks. And so, you've got the pollution in a place where it can be treated or plugged. You can plug a pipe if you have to. Agriculture was different, particularly in the early 1970s. It was known to be, a pollutant, primarily because of all the phosphorus in it, but agriculture waste. But it wasn't considered a big enough problem to address. It was also considered too hard of a problem because it's a non-point source pollution. It's cow patties on pastures, and you can pick up a pipe, but you can't really squeegee a farm field. And so it was kind of done out of expedience back in the early 70s, but agriculture has changed a lot since then. And the scale of the farms have gotten so big that you have literally, lagoons of manure that are constantly filling up, and they need to be emptied. And too often they're emptied on landscapes that may or may not need that nutritional infusion. And then it ends up in the water. And that's why we have this toxic.
And so make that connection between the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico and the dairy farm in Iowa.
Yeah. And that one's a little, it was like, this sounds kind of cynical, but it was, I guess, fortunate timing for the book when I was writing this, because 2019 was like, maybe it was straddling 2018 or 2020. I can't remember, but there was 12 months that were the wettest period on record in the Mississippi River Basin. And that meant a lot of water going down the Mississippi, and that meant a lot of nutrients in the water. And so
from runoff.
Not to be confused with Twerk 7 Tuesday. Hello, those of you that know about Twerk 7 Tuesday. But Working Women Wednesday was all about women who were just making an incredible mark. And this young lady hailed from Baltimore, Maryland. But what she was doing down in Atlanta was unlike anything I had seen at the time. And she had this restaurant called Slutty Vegan. And all I saw was people eating these burgers and talking about how amazing they were. And when I found out she was from here, she was back home, and we said, nah, we're getting her on the show. And so she first came on the show in 2019, and I'll never forget talking to her how electric her energy was. And so I'm so glad that she's here today, especially at a conference that's centered around generational wealth, because someone like her and her story is really, really important that I think all of us will learn a lot from. So can we give a really, really big round of applause and warm welcome to Miss Pinky Cole Hayes, who's officially here representing CEO extraordinaire, innovator, entrepreneur. This is a real dynamic woman. Can I tell y'all? First of all, how y'all doing? Okay, so the last time that I saw you, you had locks. I had locks. And I had locks. We had locks together. And then we ain't got no hair. We don't have no hair. That's a lot of evolution. Come on, Jesus. It's so good to see you. It feels good in the summer, doesn't it? It feels great in the summer. I can just get out the shower and get out. Yeah. So every now and then I miss my locks, because sometimes I'll see a picture, I'm like, dang, them locks was locking. And then it's like days like this where I'm like, well, you look beautiful. Thank you. You as well. It's so good to see you. You as well. And I know I'm just excited. Every time you come home, what does it feel like when you're back home? Because I know you're based in Atlanta, but I feel like home is really special to you.
Home is really special, man. Like every time I come to Baltimore, the way that I get embraced. Like growing up, all the people that I knew was famous was Jada Pinkett, right? So now people are like, oh, Pinky, like you rep in Baltimore, and it feels so good to be able to represent the city who made me who I am, right? Like I can go to any room, I can go to any, be around anybody, any congregation, and the Baltimore, the two is still gonna come out. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to come from East Baltimore, Zadonia Avenue, and go to Baltimore City College High School and Western High School, and I don't know if some people in here are from Baltimore, you know it's a difference. But to be able to do that and make something of myself and represent for my city, that feels really good, and I don't take that for granted.
Yeah, and I love that you rep your city. You rep everywhere you go.
All the time.
You rep, and that's important. So I want to, one thing I want to do is at any time, if anybody has a question, because time is of the essence, Tim. So if anybody has a question at any time, feel free to just jump into the conversation. I don't like to wait till the end, because we end up running out of time. But if at any time you want to ask something, just put your hand up and I'll make sure we get that, okay? But one of the things I want to talk about when I think about your journey, because I've kind of followed it from the beginning. But when you first came in 2019, you had this whole other story before Slutty Vegan even was. So I want to go all the way back, because I think when we talk about wealth and building and success, people don't realize, like, over your journey, you acquired certain skills, and the skills were transferable, and all those skills you develop. And we're going to start in Baltimore when you're throwing parties, because that required, and you gained a skill. And each part of your journey, I think you gained skills that helped you for what you're doing today. So I want people to kind of pay attention to that aspect. So take us to Baltimore when you're, where you grew up, and when you start throwing parties, and then, going from Baltimore to then New York, or college and then New York. So kind of take us through that beginning.
Yeah, so the beginning was very interesting, and I feel like the beginning of our stories really shape who we are. So I actually was born in a single parent household. My father got arrested, and he ended up doing 22 years in prison. So I watched my mother be this entrepreneur. She's the lead singer of a reggae band called Striker Spotty, right? So she was like a local celebrity in the DMV area, but she also had a job. She worked at the bank and still worked at the same bank for 39 years today. So I grew up learning what loyalty and commitment looked like on this side, and then I also learned how to be a risk taker on this side, okay? So I've been doing it the legal way. And I knew that I didn't want to be regular, whatever that meant. When I was a kid, I said, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be a star. Like, all my friends laughed at me like, Pinky, you crazy, you dream big. You know some of their friends when you growing up. But I knew that my greatness was not tied to where I was at that present moment. So as I was growing up, I started throwing parties. I'm like 15 and 16 years old, having the biggest high school parties in Baltimore City. I'm talking about, I would charge $10 for people to come to the party. And I would charge $1 for the waters, DJ popping, like it was a big thing. And I'm like, oh, I can really do this. I'm a business owner, right? And eventually I started selling like with chickens in high school. I would buy my chickens for $1 and sell them for $2 in the cafeteria. And then I would buy candy and sell it. And I knew that what I did very, very well is I knew how to bring people together. So when I graduated high school, I went to Clark Atlanta University. Okay, one of us, yes, come on. Yeah. So when I went to college, that was kind of like my playground. I'm like, all right, I know how to bring people together. People like me. They like talking to me. They come to things that I create. So I got to college and I started doing everything. I joined Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I was Miss Hey, okay. I became Miss Junior. I became Miss Omega Psi Phi. Then I became Miss Clark Atlanta University. So I'm like, I have a gift where I know how to connect people, and I knew I can do that very well. Fast forward, I packed up my bags and I moved to Los Angeles, California, with a duffel bag and a suitcase and a Bible. And when I went out there, I had no job lined up, but I just knew that I wanted to be great. And sometimes you don't know what that path is. You just gotta go, close your eyes and jump. And my father always told me success is like throwing mud at the wall. Something gotta stick. So when I went to LA, I'm like, all right, what am I gonna do? I had to figure it out. So I ended up working in TV. And I became a production assistant. My sorority sister was like, Pinky, you need some money, you can't keep getting refund checks. And I was doing background work, and I'm like, all right, this is a little ghetto, okay? I gotta do something legitimate. So she told me that I could work on a show called Judge Karen's Court. So who would have thought that this little girl from East Baltimore, who had a father who did 22 years in prison, would end up not only working in TV, but climbing up the ranks, which you know is incredibly difficult to do in a short amount of time. I wake up one day and I'm a producer on the Maury Show, y'all. I'm like, how did I get here? I'm like, you are the father, what's going on? But I'm working on the show, and one of my good friends, he was like, Pinky, there's this restaurant. It's called, I don't remember the name of it. It was like, but they're subleasing. Do you want to open up a restaurant? And I'm like, well, I like to eat. I don't really cook like that, but I like to eat, so sure, why not? And I'll never forget it. The rent was $2,400 a month. And I signed a little bootleg lease, and I moved my stuff in. While I was a producer at the Maury Show, I took my 401k, I got a little loan from a family friend, and I opened up my first restaurant, and it was called Pinky's Jamaican and American Restaurant. So before Slutty Vegan, I was slanging jerk chicken and oxtails, okay? And this was even before, I didn't even eat it, right? But I was selling it, and paperclip that because I wasn't in alignment. Entrepreneurs, make sure that you are in alignment. I had that restaurant for 2 years. And then I woke up one day and that restaurant caught on fire. And I lost everything. And I didn't get it back. You know why? Because I didn't have fire insurance. That's what I said. My dumbass. I'm like, what is going on? But I didn't have fire insurance. And because I didn't have fire insurance, I was unable to recoup anything that I had. So I fell into a depression. It got really, really dark for me. But I truly believe that God will ordain your steps, whether you like them or not. Because in that moment, he was really rebuilding my path. So much so that I got an opportunity to work on a show called I'ma Fix My Life. And here it is. I'm like, I need some therapy, and I get hired to work on a therapy show. I'm like, look at God, what are you trying to show me? Okay, so I'm working on the show, and I get to help people heal while getting the healing that I need. And here comes an opportunity to open up what we know as Slutty Vegan. I'm sitting in my 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm sitting there, and at the time, I'm running 5 miles a day. I'm reading one book a day. My friends called me crazy, just like they did when I was a kid. And I knew that I was preparing for something big, and I didn't know what it was. And then one day, I was sitting in my 2-bedroom apartment, and Slutty Vegan hit me like a light bulb. Now, there was some grass associated with that, but I see some kids in here, so I'm going to say what kind of grass. Okay? You know what kind of grass? Oh, it's legal here. Okay, you know what kind of grass I'm talking about. But anyway, that is when I came up with Slutty Vegan. And when I tell you, when God has something for you, nothing can derail the path. Because as much as I lost my first business, as much as I didn't know anything about building a hamburger empire, every single thing fell in my lap. I'm talking about starting from a ghost kitchen to starting a food truck, to building an empire, to creating 14 locations, to becoming a cover girl on Essence magazine, making a Time 100 list, making a Forbes 1000 list, getting a cover of England. So many things that I've done by way of the journey and the pathway. So I appreciate all of the steps that I've taken, but this is a road very well traveled. Has it been easy? Hell no. But it's been so worth it, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I love that. That's a heck of a story, right? Now I want to pause real quick before we keep going. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so everybody's following. So a couple things I'm taking away is one, there are, again, certain skill sets that were interchangeable for you. No matter what you did, you were willing to take a risk. You knew that you were a connector. So whether you're connecting people with parties or connecting people to shows or connecting people with food, you know that you're a connector and you know you're willing to take a risk. Yeah. How many people in here you know your strengths like that? Okay, that's good.
That's a superpower.
So part of it's a superpower. So part of taking the risk is when you know yourself, when you know what you have to offer that will work whether in anything, right? So sometimes we get more caught up with what we do versus how we're able to do what we do. And so for those who may not know the strength yet, if I'd have got stuck in, I'm a radio personality, then the day I didn't have radio, I'd have lost myself. Yeah. Because I'd have been so caught up in the vehicle and not the fact that I'm the driver. So it don't matter what vehicle I get in, as long as I know how to drive, right, I'll be all right. Now the vehicle may look a little different. One may be a little better, one may be a little janky, but I can drive any vehicle because it ain't the vehicle, it's me. So that's something that I'm getting when I'm hearing you, because you've been in multiple vehicles, but we're hearing the same themes, right? Is that there's a level of risk that she's always willing to take, and that no matter what, she knows how to bring some folks together.
Always.
Okay, so one of the things I want to ask, another thing that I'm seeing is on your entrepreneur journey. Let's talk about what happens when you're making money, but do you just kind of did you walk away from your production gig after a while? Like, at what point did you know, I don't need a job anymore, this will be entrepreneurship, will be what I do full time? And then, how did you transition? Or did you just jumped in and it's like, we full time, go or bust? Like, how does that work for you?
God will make you uncomfortable so that you can pursue the path that you were supposed to be on, right? So I'm working on a show and I got the first restaurant, because it's happened twice, right? Working entrepreneur, both go rounds. Okay. And in both instances, I got really uncomfortable. And people often mistake uncomfortability as to like, all right, well, you got to continue to do that same thing and then it'll change. Sometimes uncomfortability means that you got to do something different, because God is signaling you a message saying, all right, something got to change. You got to pivot. Yeah. You have to do something different. So I got uncomfortable both times, and it got to the point, it's almost like a pressure busting pipe. And eventually, that pressure is going to bust that pipe where you cannot do the things that you were doing before. So I knew that I had to take a leap and fully focus on my restaurant. And the minute that I did that, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I'll give you a story. When I was working on the Y'all Fix My Life, I'll never forget it. I was running a team of 7, and I didn't tell my employees that I started Slutty Vegan. I didn't know Slutty Vegan was about to pop like I did. And I get a call, and they brought me into the office, and they told me like, hey, Pinky, unfortunately, we gotta let you go. I was devastated. I ain't never been fired from a job. I'm the one to do the firing, right? So I get fired, and I was devastated. But that same day, I went to this 24-hour spa called JG in Atlanta. If you go to Atlanta, you gotta go. So I bring my team members, and we over here I'm sad, I'm trying to figure it out, because this is a really good position. I'm making $5,000 a week at 29 years old. That's a lot of money. I had somebody's dream job. But then here is Slutty Vegan. So I'm sitting here at J2, and I get a call from Jermaine Dupree. And it was like at 12:45 midnight, in the middle of the night. And we're at J2 at the time. And he called me like, hey, Pinky, I got Snoop Dogg and Lil Duval here. They want some food. Can you bring the food truck? This was the day that I got fired, right? And I had some decisions to make, and I'm like, all right, we just put the truck up. It was 45 minutes from where we were. That means it would take almost 2 hours to get back, to get the truck, to go back to JD's studio, to feed Snoop Dogg, to do whatever is required. But let me tell you something about being a risk taker in business. Yes, it took 2 hours, but that 2 hours changed my life. Because the day that Snoop Dogg bit to them damn fries, okay, he went online and he told everybody to go to Slutty Vegan, and my business has been up ever since, all because I chose to take that leap. So when I tell you, if you are employed and you are an entrepreneur at the same time, there's going to be a time, especially if you're doing it right, that you're going to have to make some real-time decisions, but don't do it just because it feels right. Do it when it don't feel right. Do it when you feel uncomfortable and you know that your business has great potential. You put the pieces in place and you can walk away knowing that, all right, I'm going to put my heart and soul in this, because when you do take that risk, there's a lot of greatness that comes with that risk. And I'm going to sit here and be honest, taking a risk means that there may be some obstacles along the way. If you don't know my story, I built a $100 million brand and I lost it for 43 days. And I bought it back 43 days later. But it's the art of being a risk taker. And you as an entrepreneur have to be okay knowing that sometimes the chips going to be up and sometimes they're going to be down, but it's the art of the process and knowing that you get to continue on the journey and doing exactly what you love with pure and good intentions.
I love that. I want to talk about some of those hard lessons, those hard times, because I think one thing I learned about was this term called homeostasis, right? And homeostasis means basically your body always wants to be at a certain level of comfort at all times. That's why if you get too cold, you get goosebumps, right? If you get too hot, you sweat. The body always wants to be at homeostasis. And so does the mind. The mind wants comfort. It doesn't like discomfort. So the minute you're uncomfortable, you ever had that moment where it's like, you know, dang, I could have just did this. You know, I done jumped out here, but I really could go do this and make that $5,000 a week. How did you push through the discomfort or push through? Because I feel like when we're in times of discomfort, usually you're immediately trying to figure out how to stabilize. So you don't think to yourself, this discomfort is just what I needed. Yes. Typically, when you have discomfort, what are you trying to do? You got to find a comfort again. So that's why we run back to certain people. That's why we run back to certain jobs. Or we run back to what we know, because the body is homeostasis. And people would tell me, like, you know, don't listen, you know, just kind of don't listen to the thoughts, you know, but that's hard to do because the thoughts are banging like, you know. So how did you push through that? Because I don't think that everybody is good at just sitting in the discomfort, or sometimes they start to panic or they get anxious, and next thing you know, you're falling into habits that may not be good for you.
I will say this: we always know what it is that we need to do. There is a little voice. Y'all know that voice? That's really God. But it's a little voice that tells you what it is that you need to do. And I'll be honest, my clearest thoughts came in my brokest moments. When I had not a pot to piss in, when I was rubbing them pennies together, is when I had my clearest thoughts. Because you get an opportunity to sit with yourself. And sometimes you gotta sit with yourself, and what happens is, and I'm guilty of it, when you don't have much, you got all the opportunity in the world to sit with yourself, but when you have a lot, you don't think about the things that you need to think about, because you get what? You get comfortable.
Absolutely.
So when you're uncomfortable, that is when the real raw truth comes out and you get to dissect. And you're right, it doesn't feel good when you're in those uncomfortable moments. But when I take a step back and look at the uncomfortable times when I'm past it, I'm like, I needed to go through that. Because it's almost like beta. My new president always says, like, everything is always in beta, right? When you are uncomfortable, it really means that you're in beta. You're always figuring out, you're always fixing, you're always identifying what to do different. So being uncomfortable means always being in beta, and that is when you get the clearest thoughts, for me anyway, right? So as I maneuver into this next phase of my professional career, I am finding the synergies between always being uncomfortable for good reason, but also having that level of clarity and not ever getting comfortable. right? Because oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we get comfortable, business is doing good, you feel like you ain't gotta create no more. And the minute you stop creating, that's when you lose it all. This ain't a money game we playing with entrepreneurship. This is a creativity game. Like, how can you expand your mindset to be able to create new ideas that will continue to scale your brand? The reason why Apple works is because every 9 months they come out with a new product. Okay, you can't even use that charger no more in that car because they came out with something new. You understand what I'm saying? But somebody is back there expanding the mindset because they don't want to ever get comfortable. Because the minute they get comfortable, there's going to be T-Mobile, or there's going to be somebody else, or there's going to be another company, Microsoft, is going to come in and do what they didn't do because they got comfortable and they were sitting around and not thinking about big ideas.
Yeah. I want to talk about beta because a lot of people don't know what beta is, but beta is really important. I had one of my other entrepreneurs, Omi Bell, she used to say, all entrepreneurship is one big experiment.
Yes.
And so beta, speak to that word and what that means, what that means to you and what that means in business.
So let's think about an app, right? So let's think about Instagram. So before Instagram launches a new product, and a new product could be like where the button goes on the interface on Instagram. You ever go on Instagram and like, okay, I remember this button was over here this time, but now they push it over here, psyche, right? So beta is when they do a trial run of a certain thing to make sure that it works. It's a group study, group case study, right? Make sure that it works. Do people like it? Is it user friendly? So you do this study to identify if it works or not, and you do the study with people, right? You test it out. Beta is almost like when they test medicine with animals. That is also in beta, but tech specifically, beta is an opportunity to identify if a product will work or not and how well it will work. What are the bugs that need to be fixed? How do you need to change it? So let's talk about entrepreneurship. When I said everything is in beta, every single day that I wake up, there is a new opportunity to do something different, right? It's like a marathon. I'm Pinky in the brain in real life, okay? Pinky, how are we going to take over the world, okay? There is a new challenge to unlock every single day. And when I say beta, as a founder, there's blueprints all over the place. But you're walking in a real-time blueprint, especially for me. I'm building a vegan empire. You see vegan restaurants closing every single day. So here I am trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Do people like Impossible? Do people not want soy? Do people want to have more healthier options? Do they want wraps, or do they want food that tastes like regular people food? And that beta for me is testing it out with the people, asking people questions, doing surveys, seeing what it is that people like, what they don't like, and all that is called is data. Data drives businesses. If you are an entrepreneur, you got to make sure that you got that data. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that is making sure that you have the phone number and the email to every single person who patronizes your business, because you can utilize them in a way in which it helps you make decisions on how to grow your company. So while you're in beta and you're launching a new product, you can utilize the people that consume you the most. And that's the people that spend their dollars on you. So I'm forever in beta, always coming up with new ideas, especially now, to take my business to the next level. Because if you want to be great, you got to talk like the greats, you got to walk like the greats, you got to move like the greats. That's the only way to get to where you want to be. You have to always be researching. You have to always be identifying how the data can help you. And you have to always be finding ways to unlock challenges.
I love that. Did everybody catch that?
Did y'all catch that?
All right. Always stay in beta. Beta creates the data, data creates the product. Some of y'all out here selling slippers and don't nobody wear them anymore. So that's because you didn't test it. You didn't test it.
Stay in beta.
Stay in. So I'm gonna pause again before we keep the conversation going. Anybody got any questions so far?
Oh, we got one.
Okay, come on. Because I don't like to wait to the end. Come with it.
First of all, I want to thank you all for sharing your knowledge with us today. I'm in that stage right now of discovering when to transition my business to an in-profit business. So I've been investing for 5 years. I've developed the skill set of being able to time investments. And I'm sharing this within a group of 30 people in the chat. I feel as though because I haven't discovered, I haven't reached a certain dollar sign that I want next to my net worth that I should be charging for my services. So I'm trying to understand when is the right time to make that jump. But the main thing that I have been trying to do is build community. So I've been hosting events in DC. I just had one recently at the park on 14th. I did that because I attended an event last November called the Black Wealth Summit. And I met local entrepreneurs and a couple guys, you may know them from Iron Leisure. So it was like an eye-opening experience. So my question is, when is the right time to make that jump in terms of, wanting to offer community service, but also profit from it?
Okay, so I got an idea for you. What's the name of what you do? What's the name of your business?
Nav Trades.
Nav Trades?
Nav Trades.
And is your audience Black people who trade?
Yes, primarily.
Okay, all right, I got an idea for you. It might not work for you, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm about to give you a whole playbook. Okay? So you're not making money right now, right?
Not for my community, no.
Okay, so what you're going to do is you are going to build a community that people are going to pay a subscription fee to be a part of your community. And you need to call it Black People Who Trade, right? I know it sounds simple, follow me. Black People Who Trade is an organization for Black people who trade. Sometimes we make it so difficult. It ain't even gotta be difficult, okay? Follow me. You're gonna create this organization. They are going to pay $500 a month, right? Recurring. You're gonna get a subscription. There's a couple of subscription-based model services online. I forget the name. Dora, if you remember the name, say it out loud. But there are a couple of organizations where you pay them a fee, they build the community for you, and people just tap into the community. You charge them $500 a month every month. What do they get for $500 a month? This is basic, right?